Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first in our Lunch and Learn series for She Changes the Game. We are so excited to have an amazing panel of amazing women from all different corners of the sports world to talk about the impact of women coaches today. So thank you all so much for joining, and thank you again to all of our panelists for being here today. So I'm going to kick it over to Ahada to get us started with some introductions. And just as we're going through, feel free to drop any comments in the chat, any questions, and we'll have a little time for Q&A at the end. So thanks everybody again.
All right, thank you, Alana. I appreciate that introduction. So we're going to do things a little bit differently today than our usual lunch and learns. I know you all are used to seeing, a bunch of slides and that sort of thing. We're not going to do a whole lot of that today. We're going to have more of a discussion. I have some badass women that are here today to talk about the impact of women coaches on youth. And so we're going to have a great discussion. But I did want to start off just by stating, so again, I'm Dr. Ahada McCummings. I'm the Senior National Director of Organizational Learning and External Affairs here at Up2Us Sports. And my degree is in global training and development, but I did my dissertation on the lack of female leaders in collegiate sports. And so one of the things, a couple slides that I want to show you is, here we are at the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And while Title IX, you'll see, had tremendous impact in terms of number of girls and women that are participating in sports, you'll see that we steadily inclined from 1972 at the inception all the way up through to now, where we're pretty much at 50% of girls and women participating in sports. So great job on that regard. However, we did see a huge decrease and a big drop of administrators and leaders in collegiate sports. And the same thing has happened in youth sports as well as professional sports. And so you'll see that the big dip happened right around 1982. So just to give you a little bit of context, what happened at that point was that athletic departments in college sports there used to be a women's department and a men's department. And women generally led and coached in the women's sports. But when schools started going to one athletic department, it was believed that men should be the ones who lead those athletic departments, mainly because you had to lead football programs and basketball programs. And the thought was that women weren't able to lead those programs. And so men became the leaders of athletic departments. And men also recognized that because more girls and women were playing sports, that it could be a lucrative career for them as well. And so they then also started taking on those coaching spots as well. So that's where you see the numbers. And we have yet to really recover from the impact that it's had on coaches and the impact that it's had on leaders, both in the collegiate space, the professional space, as well as the youth space. And so what's happened is that there has been created this sort of pipeline for women that are in the sports industry. And here again, in the collegiate space, generally women start out as a collegiate athlete and they work their way up. And that's the pipeline. They then finish college, they become an assistant coach, a head coach, and work their way up as an administrator and a leader in athletic departments. And this parallels really what happens in youth sports as well, that girls generally are playing, they're playing in high school, they may play some club, they may also play in college, and then they take that career and they become coaches, and then you start to see them in leadership positions as well. The unfortunate thing is that we don't have enough at the coach level, and we really need to work on the pipeline for women in the sports industry. So as of right now, roughly about 25% of our youth coaches in the US are women. That's it. And that's pretty consistent across the board. And so Up2Us Sports has our She Changes the Game initiative, which our goal is to reach a coach force of 50% women to help girls continue playing sports. And so we've made some commitments. We've recommitted ourselves since the beginning of this initiative through activating our partnership pledge to build a community of organizations investment in hiring more women coaches, prioritizing the recruitment of women coaches by developing a recruitment toolkit for our partner organizations, and hosting virtual recruitment events for women coaches, which we have one coming up. We also want to support our women coaches with career readiness resources and events, and create awareness about the importance of women coaches through the She Changes the Game podcast, which I'll be hosting shortly, as well as these Lunch and Learns. We're going to have a series of episodes around women coaching and keeping girls in sports. And so what we know is that the more women there are coaching, the more girls benefit from the empowering role models that exist. So that's it for our slides. I told you this is going to be slightly different. What I want to do is switch gears and introduce our panelists. So first up, we have Pamela Ayala, who is a returning Up2Us Sports softball and baseball coach with the LA Dodgers Foundation at Lincoln Park. Born and raised in LA, playing softball and baseball. She's currently a student at CSU Sacramento studying business economics and sports management. We have Darien Mack, who, let me give you the rundown on Darian. So she led her high school team to a state championship where she was MVP, as well as 2014 Gatorade Player of the Year, former collegiate volleyball player at the University of Kentucky, where she ranks 8th in all-time career kills of 802 as an outside hitter, and a member of the SEC championship team in 2017. She was an SEC academic team for all 4 years, SEC Community Service Team, member of the Frank G. Ham Society, and recipient of the Arthur Ashe Jr. Award for Excellence in Athletics and Classroom Achievement. She's played professionally in Finland, a former youth volleyball coach for a number of different youth sports organizations, including mine. She coached for me at Premier Sports and Leadership Academy, AVCA, which is the American Volleyball Coaches Association Diversity Award winner, former volunteer assistant coach for North Carolina State University volleyball team, former assistant coach for the University of Southern Mississippi volleyball program, and currently Darian has now joined us at Up2Us Sports as a program coordinator out of Dallas. And so welcome, Darian. Welcome, Darian. We have Collette B. Smith. Collette, yay! Who always joins us. Collette is an Up2Us Sports ambassador. She's also the founder and president of Believe in You Incorporated, NFL's first African-American woman coach in franchise history, first woman coach in the Jets franchise history, former women's professional football player, former director of marketing, PR, and promotions in 2 women's professional football leagues. She's featured in the docuseries Exceptional Black Women on the BET Her Network, along MC Lyte, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Megan Good, and Terry Vaughn, and is currently in production for her own full-length documentary and working on 2 books, not 1, but 2. Unapologetically Collette, Stories from the NFL's first African-American female coach in history, and Get Off the Bench. So welcome, Collette. We are always, always happy to have you here with us. And of course, last but not least, we have Penny Lucas White, Mysis. She played collegiate volleyball at LSU, played professionally, nationally, and internationally, played for the US national team. Penny is entering her 12th season, right? Penny, 12th season as head volleyball coach at Alabama State, during which her time of being with the Lady Hornets, she's won 6 conference championships and the SWAC conference, coached a number of top scholar athletes who have gone on to win countless awards, founder and director of Play Like Winners Volleyball Club in Montgomery, Alabama, trained and certified speaker of the John Maxwell team, and most recently, she sits on the board of directors at USA Volleyball. Welcome, Penny Lucas White. So I am going to, let's just jump in because we've got a lot to cover. And we're talking about, the impact that women have on girls. But let's start here. Pamela, I want to start with you because you coach softball and baseball. And so it's not only an impact that women coaches have on girls, but there needs to be an impact that women coaches have on boys as well. And so I want to just get you in here and talk about what has that impact been like for you in youth sports and working with girls and boys.
Thank you for that. So I want to start off with saying it is very, it's not the same coaching boys and girls, but it also isn't so different. I would say with boys, there's that stereotype that you can't be as emotional in a game or give in, like if you are feeling pain, like you just have to suck it up to be a man. To that gender stereotype. But with the youth now, I think as a female coach, the younger boys are more comfortable with being uncomfortable in their own emotions that they might be feeling, going through. And so I think as a female coach, I am more approachable to them, or to the youth, I would say. I don't know about like teenager boys, and their puberty stages, but yeah, I think that experience it's very different. And then with women or with the girls, they naturally just want to be leaders. So I just see a lot of eagerness to participate amongst women constantly in sports.
Absolutely. Collette, let's jump to you because you can't get any more male dominated than football. So how important was it for men at that level, the highest level in football, to see a woman on the field coaching?
It was crazy enough. It was pretty seamless. When I walked out there my first day, my emotions were on level 10,000. And I wanted to, there was all this weight that I put on myself that I believe men didn't do that to themselves. Absolutely. And I went in there saying, I gotta be the best, I gotta be the greatest. Wait, do I know what I'm doing? I know what I'm doing. Wait a minute. So it was self-doubt, it was confidence, it was the same things, polar opposites happening at the exact same time. What I find very interesting was that all the doubt that I put on me, forget calling them men, these athletes wanted to be the best athletes they could be. And they were very happy to have a coach there. Sure. And so they took away a lot of that, all those negative thoughts or that imposter syndrome that I may have had for moments. Sure. It was completely opposite of what I thought. And when I think about girls, let me just digress for 1 second. When I was playing football for my women's pro football team, we all had male coaches. Mm-hmm. And the male coaches that just for the first time coaching us girls, us women, would say, this is the best thing ever. And I would look at them, because I'm the oldest woman on the team. And I would say, what are you talking about? Tell me, explain. Mm-hmm. And they would say just exactly what you just said. When we tell you women to do something in a drill, you ask, why are we doing it? What's the benefit going to be? The boys never asked us that. The boys were more or less, okay, we'll just do it. But the girls were like, tell me why. What's it going to benefit? It was a different component for us, and men saw that. So absolutely. Women, we're true leaders. Like Pamela was saying, we are literally true leaders.
Absolutely, absolutely. Darian, you played on all different levels, right? And so you've had a number of different coaches from the time you started playing volleyball as a youth, all the way through playing professionally. And you've had male coaches, you've had female coaches. And you and I have had this conversation, right, about getting out of this idea. Yes, there are some things that we need to do specifically when talking about girl athletes, but remembering that they're athletes and that there's this misconception that you can't be as hard. Penny, I know as somebody who's a hard coach, that can't be further from the truth. But this idea that we can't be as hard with girls, that we have to change our language with girls. What was that like for you, switching from having male coaches and having female coaches, and what that meant for you as an athlete?
Well, I think so. I know in high school I had a female coach, and then whenever I played travel, and then through college I had a male coach. And so I think just having a female coach is, I think, and just working under ones as well, I think I kind of benefited more just with the relatability and just the comfortability of just being able to talk to them about things that I might not be comfortable talking with my male coaches. I think a lot of the time with the male coaches, everything is just a business level. You show up, you do your thing, and that's it. And I think having a female coach is you have that little bit of personability, and you could, have a little bit other things to talk about besides the sport, and you could feel comfortable coming to them with anything you ever needed. And but that's just kind of the difference I had as far as playing and just working under them was, male coaches, it's, hey, we show up, this is it, nothing else. And you kind of want a little bit more. And especially when you're in college and I went away from home. And so everything's brand new, and, it'd be nice to just have, I can come up to the office and have a chat and not just have strictly volleyball. So those are kind of the differences I had as far as just having female coach versus a male coach.
Penny, I've seen you in action. So both on the court and off the court, in times when a player will call you up when you're nowhere near Montgomery, Alabama on a volleyball court to say, hey, coach, this is what's going on. And that goes to really the culture that you create within your program. And so I want you to talk about that. What is the culture that has to be created for girls in sports, especially as coaches, when we step into these positions? Like Darian said, girls do in some respect need a little bit more. We need to know that there's some type of connection. We need to know that we're not just, a number of a player coming in to fill a spot. And so can you talk about that culture building that happens when you're coaching girls?
Absolutely. I am big. I am a proponent for creating a culture that creates championships, not just championships on the court, but champions of life. And what Darian was really talking about is girls have to bond to battle, and guys want to battle to bond. But girls creating that bond that lasts a lifetime, but a culture that exemplifies a champion in life, that can hold you accountable, that gives you a level of confidence, a fiduciary trust. Whereas my players, I could be on the road and they would call just literally because I'm a confidant, I'm a mama, I'm a coach, I'm a friend, I'm a mentor, and they understand who I am depending on where we are. If we're in the gym on the court, I'm Coach White. If they have to call me at 2 or 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock at night, I'm a mentor / mom / protector, because we as coaches are in a position that we are here to build, support, nurture, and we're in a position that we can either just harm them or we can nurture them and build them into the strongest women ever. So I think we have to take our position very seriously, because we are the ones that are pouring into them day in and day out. But culture, once you ask a student athlete, let's say the season is about to begin, and you say, what experience do you want to have the next 10 weeks or the next 3 to 4 months? That's when they can define to you what that culture looks like. Generation Z is very clear on what experience they want to have. And so that's what I do, whether it's with my club or whether it's with my collegiate team. And when they say we want a genuine sisterhood, Coach White, well, what does that look like? And accountability. What else does that look like? Because when we hold each other accountable, you know, girls normally say, well, you know, and they put stuff on the back burner, but we teach them how to confront each other with respect, knowing that there's no ceiling. These student athletes will rise, but a culture must be policed daily in order to get the best out of your female athletes. But if they were to tell you, I want accountability, I want a positive experience, I want a championship. If you want a championship, do you know what that look like? They'll begin to tell you. So then you also start getting them stories. We know at one point, there have been teams that have been loaded with talent, but they didn't reach their, what we call potential, which is something we never can measure. Potential you really can't measure, but if you're creating a culture that you want to see excel, then we measure performance daily. We measure actions daily. And women are very good at complimenting each other if they do something well, or also if they have a fallback, then we become their hype women. But it's a culture that you create. And I think with that, that's my biggest pet peeve. I really I delve into what experience do you want to have the next 3 to 4 months. And then we talk about a plethora of things of what that's going to cover. The physicality, what it's going to cover, the mentality, what it's going to cover, the enthusiasm and energy level, the work ethic and the effort level, and all of that. All of that. And when you can really be able to dissect that, I love going to practice. Yeah. And they would too. Yes. They will, and they love the heat of competition.
Yeah. Yes. Pamela and Collette, I want to get you in here. You both, Collette, I know you talk to young girls all the time, not just coaching, but just in general, just young girls, talking to them about being great and how you go about that. And Pamela, with you coaching young people, what is that like for you? Because it's slightly different than a collegiate level, slightly, not a whole lot different. I think people think that it's different because of the level of play and the level of commitment that players have on a collegiate level. However, on a youth level, whether it's rec, whatever it is, you still have to build that culture about what it is you want to have happen. So how do you do that, Pamela? What would you tell coaches who are coming in and coaching young people who may just be dipping their toes in the waters for sports? How do you create that culture?
So what I like to do is build positive team traditions. I think maybe like a little competition, a little scrimmage at the end, something to get the players to look forward to coming and showing up to these practices, games, and that would obviously let them to build more relationships. They have to work together. Team traditions can be like it's like some informal time before practice, maybe just to get everybody familiarized with each other. But I guess in the youth level, it's more about getting to understand which level everyone is at and making sure we come together to make our best performance and reach our own personal goals. Every player has their own goals, getting better at maybe a certain position, trying out a new position, getting very, like I keep saying, comfortable with getting uncomfortable, because this might be something, sports can be something new to the youth. And as a female, some people are also shy, and it's very hard to get the youth to be very independent, I would say. And so by just being that person they can rely on to talk to or whatever, I feel like that's very helpful in building my positive culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Collette?
You know, when I think about all of this, first of all, I wanted to say, I'm going to address every woman in here as a coach, because we're not called that enough. I go somewhere and they're like, oh, Miss Smith, I'm coach. Call me coach. if my name was Bob, you would call me coach. Call me coach. So I want to start that right now. The culture
Absolutely.
of this.
Absolutely.
Women coaches are to be respected, actually more respected than men. I just said it. I said it. I had women coaches that when I played football, I didn't have many of them, but I remember all of them. And they touched on things that I didn't get from the male coaches. And moving forward with that, I was able to bring that to male athletes. Male coaches were dropping the ball. They were fumbling the ball on lots of things. A coach is not just a coach on the field, on the court. They're coaches of life. And we are mentors to them. If we're doing the right thing, you're going to be a teacher, a scholar of our youth. For me, I believe that when I think about women and girls, lots of girls shy away from visibility. We're trying to go under the radar unless we're having a good hair day, unless our skin looks pretty or we have a fly outfit on. Let's be very clear. Our girls, us women, are not just subjected to that, but we have to start feeding that culture, like Coach Penny was saying, feeding that culture of your takeaways. What are your takeaways? What do you expect from this day, from being on this team, from being on this court, from being on this field? What is your takeaway? Because I can tell you 1,000 times over, my takeaway has been tremendous when I became an athlete, that I was never nurtured to do because of my gender. I believe women and girls are the greatest athletes ever. And we have to come through and overcome so much more than a male athlete. So I believe really being sincere, like at the end of the day, male or female, we are human. If you're hungry, I know you want to eat. Right? If you're out there practicing longer than everybody else, I know you want to be a better player.
That's right.
That's not male or female. That's being a human being.
That's right.
Right? So it's feeding our kids, and that nurturing component is what a coach is. Not should be, what a coach should be. It is that.
Sure. Thank you, Coach.
Can I add, because Collette gonna get me fired up in here. When I left the Air Force Academy, I was Coach White. Everywhere I went, I was Coach White. And then I go to my next institution and I didn't notice it outside. And maybe because in a military and a very formal environment, you were subjected to your title, then your last name. Coming back, I guess, as they call it, out of the bubble. Collette, have you ran into where they don't address you as Coach Smith? You're Coach Collette, but Bob is Coach White. Bob is Coach Taylor, whatever his last name is. And when I, was moving around, they called me Coach Penny. I said, I'm sorry, my name is Coach White, because you just call Coach Barlow, Coach Barlow. But you didn't call him Coach Reggie. You called me Coach Penny. And that was a big deal to me at first. That was a big deal. Later on, I took it and I embraced it because of social conditioning. And so until they understood that a lot of us only do what we've always been taught to do, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that's what they do. So it's a female, Coach Penny. But if you had a male in the room, you addressed him by his last name. So what I started to do is I took it and I embraced it and I used it for my good. I took it, if you can call me by my first name, Coach Penny, hey, can you come in and can you just make sure that floor is mopped today, and I want the lights on early, and I'll be, and I embraced it to where I got more from them being able to connect with me from a softer side. But I totally agree with you, Collette, totally agree with you. I was just wondering if you ever ran into that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's interesting because no matter what platform it may be, wherever I am, whether I'm being interviewed by the NFL or coaching in the NFL or coaching in high school or visiting a school, a college, it's Collette. But when Coach Stone walks in the room, he's Coach Stone. And so I would just kind of and I have to catch myself and say, okay, you've just identified that. See, I'm a fixer. There's a problem. Let me get to the bottom of it. So I would then quickly just say, my name is Coach Smith. Now, I don't mind just being called coach, but there's such a double standard. And me being the leader that I am will advocate for girls to see me in action and how I handle myself, how I conduct myself. I want little girls to sit back that are probably sitting like this to go, right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anyone's trying to be rude. You better get your foot off my neck.
I don't know if we want to use that term.
I mean,
but
get your foot off my neck, right? I mean, I'm not saying that. My actions are saying that. You're going to treat me with respect the way you would do anybody else.
I agree.
That's not my gender. So
and I
lead
also
by
want
example.
to say, and I also want to say, hey, Sarah.
Are you?
Okay, moving on. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I love it. I love it. Darian, Coach Darian, Coach Mack, I will address you as all. The reality is that young girls are going to have a male coach at some point, most likely. And we have male coaches who are here, right, who are working with young girls. And so what's your advice to men who are coaching girls and what they need to know? And I'm sure they're learning. I coach with my brother, and there's so much he has learned. He was a football player, played collegiate football, professional football, and then switched and started coaching girls, and has learned a tremendous amount through that process. I'm sure some headaches have happened through that process. But there are some things I think that men need to know and understand when dealing with girls. And so can you enlighten our brothers that are on here about how you deal with girls and women when you're coaching?
Absolutely. I think the first thing first, as a male coach, I think you have to invest in the people around you and the women around you. So if you are coaching, you have a head coach, don't be just in your own. I think a lot of times, especially in volleyball, men coaches tend to be in their own little bubble, and they just, of course, you want to be coaching with someone you're comfortable with, and that might be a buddy that you played with or in the past. And so I think the first thing is just to expand your network and your connections with up and coming coaches, and just basically invest into the people around you, the women around you. That's the first things first, and try to bring them along, and they can be a part of the journey that you're going on as well as a coach. I think the second thing is, sometimes we're, as coaches, you have to be able to learn. We're always learning. If you stop learning as a coach, then in my opinion, you're only going to get so far. And so whenever you're on that journey of coaching young women, you have to learn how to communicate, maybe in a different aspect. It's not just always the X's and O's, but sometimes you got to break things down in a certain way. So learning how to communicate, you just kind of have to take a step back and realize just who you are addressing is one of the main things. And like I said, you always have to learn. You have to learn how things are evolving, and how women are evolving, and how the world and the generation is evolving. And so, sometimes as coaches, even as myself, as coaches, you find a way, you stick with it and you like it. And, you have a next batch of kids, and you're like, this way isn't working. So you have to kind of take a step back and kind of regroup and figure out a different way how to approach things. So those are kind of basically my two biggest things, is just invest in the women around you and network around you, and then continue to learn new ways to approach whenever you're coaching.
Sure. Penny, there's a
Dr.
difference.
Ahada, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes,
Do you
absolutely.
mind if I just chime in for 1 minute?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, when we keep talking, I mean, I'm always going to fight for my girls. That's a no-brainer. But coaching youth, every player, male or female, has their own way of responding to how we coach. And as Coach Darian said, you know, you're always going to learn, right? Like, for instance, you can never do too much homework. You can never do too much homework. You write a book, read 2 more. You finish those books, read another one, right? You can always learn more. I could tell you that I would coach boys and girls. They may have the same questions. Some have different questions. It's how I approach them. And it's always going to be from, I know more than you. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's what I suggest for you. That's going to be different what I tell player B. Player B responds to this. Player C responds to this, right? So it's about responding to these individual, unique people. Everybody's different,
Sure.
right? Male or female. And women just, I feel like women just want to learn every aspect of everything so we can get it done the right way. But male or female, everybody's unique and everybody learns. I can read a book and not comprehend it until I read it 3 more times. You might read that book 1 time and you got it.
Sure.
So you're coaching based on uniqueness of your players.
Penny, I want you to jump in as well as you, Pamela. I want to go to you as well. And I know you wanted to expand on that. I'm going to let you do that. After you expand on that, I want you to talk specifically about, so you're in 2 different spaces. You're coaching youth and you're also coaching college players. And I know that in your college realm, you surround yourself with women coaches. That's who's on your staff. And so I want you to talk about how intentional that is and how you go about that. But I also want you to talk about how is it different for youth coaches, especially in programs where you're struggling to get coaches, period, right? We can't find coaches, male or female. So what's the difference, right? And how you go about recruiting women in some of these youth organizations to become coaches. And as well as you, Pamela, I want you to talk about that as well, that you are a coach who has played the game, you've been out there, but what is it that you do and say to your fellow athletes that you've played with, your friends that you've played with, who may not be in the sports space anymore, but you want to get them there? So go ahead, Penny, I'll let you expand on what
I think first you hit the nail on the head. I think one is I need to make sure that I'm very intentional, and I'm very intentional about who's on my staff, number 1. Number 2, when you're dealing with youth, you do not ever want to be their last coach. I think men has to be cognizant of the words that they choose to use when coaching young females. Regardless of what your intention is, society has already set up a form of what a good female looks like, body types, hair type, the whole 9. So you have to make sure that you create a space, 1, of professionalism, 2, establish a relationship, 3, understand what's acceptable and what is not, what's considered sexist and what is not. And that's important. But more than anything, you create an environment of positivity. Please do not talk about body types, because I think my daughter have one of the best bodies in the world, but you have no right to talk about body types, especially if you have a preference of what you think a good athlete should look like, when it has nothing to do with what they're producing on the field or on the court. Mm-hmm. Number 2, I think it's very important that we create an environment that is positive for young women to thrive, and that you don't create a ceiling. There is no such thing as ceilings. And it's obvious Collette comes across very strong and very positive about what women can do. I love it. But trust me, you can take the same 2 athletes, 2 body types. If there's 2 dogs in a fight, what dog's gonna win? The one you feed the most. So if we're feeding the positive dog, then that dog will succeed. And I use that even with my kids, because it's about what they're hearing every day, who's feeding them, and with the words that you bring is going to create the outcome. Number two, coaches should always be the student of the game, a student of the game, because generations change. And boy, has it changed over the years in how I coach. That is why I went and made sure I became certified under John C. Maxwell, because I wanted to be excellent in everything that I do when I am pontificating and speaking and trying to get kids to go from point A to point B. Because when you become a good communicator, you become one that understands how to deliver information to whom you are speaking to. So everyone is not a cookie cutter, just like Collette said. Everyone is not a cookie cutter. How I communicate with one, we have Myers-Briggs, we have the DISC, DISC community. We want to learn and understand how our kids communicate and receive information so they may go out and execute skill. The reason why I love having females on my staff is because I truly believe my purpose in life is to grow women, is to make sure that I leave the gate open for any woman that has the will and desire to become a coach. I make sure I do what I can to make that happen. There you go, sis.
That's it. That's it. Pamela, how do you do it? How do you do it? This is your second season with us, with Up2Us Sports. And so what is that message that you give to young girls that are in your program? What I love to see, we did a Instagram live a couple weeks ago with the Note of a Gay Foundation. And there were a number of young women who used to be participants in the program, who then became volunteers in their program, who then became employees of the program. And so what is that messaging like, Pamela, when you're out here working with young girls about keeping them involved and getting, it doesn't have to end, like Penny said, I don't have to be your last coach. It can continue. So how do you do it with young people?
So I like to just, I guess, be very passionate about what I'm doing, and my players will know that. The extra time I can spend with an individual who's trying to better their skills, that just shows my dedication to them. Because I enjoy seeing them build their own self-confidence and build relationships with each other, and through all that they gain like perseverance, because they get out of their comfort zone first, and then they become just as passionate about the game as I am. And that's when you work well together, when you're doing something not out of love, I'd say, but because you just love it so much, you're just naturally, it just flows. And so that's usually how it goes for me. But I think it's very important that we learn about the differences in women and men coaches, because if we, I don't know how to explain it, but if we aren't constantly including women in the sports world, or if we're not, how do I say, appreciating the excellence that women are doing instead of like men, where it's competition, and women, how women do hype each other up. The masculine heavy perspective in sports coverage will never change if we don't recognize the skills and skills that other women bring to the table, and everyone has their different ways of coaching and going about that. But I would say what sets me aside is how passionate I am to build kids' skills so that they're ready for the future and they understand what it's like to work with others, especially because you gain a lot of life skills when you build relationships with others. And yeah, everyone might be different, but your ability to respect everyone's religion or whatever it may be, then that's what it's all really about. And that's how you build that positive culture.
Love it. I love it. I want to jump to some questions that are coming in. Hard to believe. Well, I guess it's probably not hard to believe. This always happens. We come up on our hour so quickly.
We're going crazy in the chat.
I know. And I want to get to some of these questions. So Andy asks, how about the difference in coaching regarding individual or team sports? And I don't know if any of you have any background in coaching individuals. If not, I can speak to it a little bit. I've been both. But anybody want to take that one?
Well, I tried to answer a little bit in the chat, and I think it's about developing the relationship of one of professionalism, but I wasn't sure if you was talking about if I'm coaching a track player or a golf player who has, well, I'm gonna leave that to you to you go for it, sis. I'm sorry.
Sure. So I will say this. I think that you still need to develop a culture. So I was an individual athlete early on. When I was younger, I was a figure skater and did competitive figure skating for years and years and years before I then switched and started playing a team sport, which was volleyball. And what I remember is, number one, I had a male coach when I was a figure skater, and a male coach. And on top of that, because it's still the same way in figure skating, you don't see a lot of Black people in figure skating. So I had a white male coach. And I never felt as though I could relate or had any real support other than the sport itself from my coach. And I remember, being very young and just wondering, when do I get to see myself, right? When do I get to see myself? And so I think that if you're coaching individual athletes who are in individual sports, that there still is a culture that can be created between the two of you, coach and athlete, but then also helping that individual connect to a community of athletes that are like them, because you have to have, it can be very lonely. If anyone saw the documentary, I don't know if anyone saw the documentary on Naomi Osaka, and my heart broke for her because while she is at the top of her game in tennis, an individual athlete sport, she was extremely lonely, when that is all that you do and all that you connect to is the sport. One of the things I make sure when I talk to people about mental sports performance, whether it's my own athletes or people that I'm consulting with, is that there always has to be something else that you're talking about and doing in your life other than just your sport, that you're connecting to people outside of just your sport. It's so very important. And so that would be my advice, Andy, is to make sure that that individual athlete isn't all consumed with that sport, that individual sport, day in and day out, and that there are some other outlets, whether it's you as a coach that helps them connect to that, or whether you help them to connect to other people that can give them something outside of that.
And someone in the chat also talked about being consistently exposed to different sports, and before the club volleyball scene, which has now broadened, and we have a lot more women of color in volleyball, but we knew we all had basketball courts everywhere. But that's the same for figure skating and the things that you did. So being able to expose you to the different avenues and the different sports would eventually allow coaches to grow, and you would have been able to see someone that looked like you coaching you. And that's what we must do as advocates for female sports, in every sport if possible.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, especially young kids. Again, Penny, you hit on it, that now we're in this club sports scene thing, right? We're heavy in it. And the unfortunate thing about that is that it's made people specialize in something. It's made people stop other sports so that they can focus on one sport. And again, that takes away your pool of women that you have access to. It takes away the different ways that your body develops, because that was one of the great things about playing many sports, was that you were working different parts of your body, different muscles. Health-wise, it was just a great thing to do. And so, yeah, for as long as possible with your young people, especially in youth sports, encourage them to, I don't get on my kids. We talk about time management, we talk about commitment, we talk about all of those things, but I don't discourage my young players from participating in softball and participating in basketball during the season and participating in whatever else they want to participate in, because ultimately it makes them better all around.
Absolutely. I love multi-sport athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have a question from Marcus for Coach Mack. What is the biggest difference or adjustment going from being an athlete to being a coach and getting into the real world? You are now in the real world. So what's been the biggest adjustment for you moving through those worlds?
I think athlete to coach, one of the big adjustments was basically the other half of how everything works. You know, as an athlete, you just get your itinerary, you show up to practice, everything's kind of laid out for you, you do what you need to do, and you kind of have those expectations for yourself, and that's kind of the reality. And then as I transferred to being a coach, it was kind of like the back end of everything, from how to do travel to, you know, laying out a practice plan for the whole week. You know, where especially during a season when you're playing Friday, Sunday, and you're trying to plan out a practice so you maximize your time with all your athletes. And, you know, you're dealing, maybe you have injuries, you're trying to make sure everybody feels good. So we're feeling great for the weekend and we feel prepared. And so that was definitely a big adjustment from just trying to do the back end of all of that and trying to make sure that our program was successful. And, you know, there was a lot of moving parts. Not everyone thinks that, you know, or I guess not everyone, but outside people think that coaches, it's X's and O's, and, you know, and especially for volleyball where you only have maybe 2 to 3 coaches and maybe an operations person, you're doing a lot. You are doing a lot of the heavy lifting of running a collegiate program or even a club program. You're doing everything. You're coaching, you're being a mentor, you're wearing all these different hats that a lot of people might not realize. And so that was definitely a big adjustment, because as a player, it's fun. We get our cool gear, you get the uniform, you show up, you got your laces on, you're ready to go. And then as a coach, you're just stressing all through the week, trying to make sure everybody's happy and prepared, and and hoping that, hey, and especially not being able to be on the physical court as a coach, I'm sitting on the sidelines. And so there is not a lot I can do. As much as I want to jump out there and just do it myself, you know, you have to learn how to communicate that in a way that, you know, that, as everyone was talking about on this panel, how to communicate with that athlete. Everyone responds differently to the information you're telling them, especially in my head. When I think that something makes sense to me, it might not make sense to them. And so how am I going to, you know, verbally try to explain something so they can understand what we're trying to convey throughout these practices? So those are the 2 big adjustments. And then the adjustments from athletics to kind of this different role that I'm in is, I would say, big schedule wise. I have a little bit more free time. During volleyball season, it is hectic, and it's 7 days a week, 24/7. And now this role, I have a little bit more free time. So those are kind of the different adjustments that I've kind of made throughout my career so far.
Absolutely.
I want to touch on what Coach Darian was saying about wanting to jump out there on the field sometimes, right? Like when I retired from playing football, I used to keep my uniform and my cleats and my helmet in the trunk of my car. Because if the game got really bad, I'm like, I'm going in. I'm gonna go in. You know, I feel like that jump from athlete to coach, it's a really big leap. It's a completely different world. But I feel like being an athlete at one point, I know what I want from my coaches, right? And so because I'm a coach, I know what my athletes might need from me, right? So you never want to be talked to. I want to be talked with, right? And so the union in that is so beautiful, like to be able to identify proactively what you believe your players might need, At the end of the day, our players need to know, our athletes need to know, especially our girls, look, boys too, but especially our girls need to know that we care, that we ultimately really care about their well-being and about seeing them excel. You know, it's that, for me, it's always been that light bulb moment. When I got something as the player, when a coach told me the right way or the way that I could understand, and I'm like, oh, I got it now, right? I'm like, I now have to pay that forward. That's not for me to keep to myself. That is for me to share with everybody else, right? So it's a balance. I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are there. We are at the end. It's been a pleasure, as always, to have, like I said, some badass women. These women I can go to for anything, any conversation. And so I do appreciate it. We're going to put some information in the chat about our Lunch and Learn series that we're having, as well as the partnership pledge that you as an organization can take to just make a commitment to hiring more women and recruiting more women as coaches. Any parting words, Pamela or Penny, that you want to leave us with? Yes, Sonoma, it went by way too quick.
It did. I really hope I answered the one question about being in the storming stage. But what you need to do, Ahada, is make sure they come back for team development and culture, and so we can touch on it. But the storming stage is really a healthy stage. It's not a stage that we want to run from. It's a stage that, as long as it's facilitated correctly, you're going to go a longer distance because you put more in it, and what you invest into, you get a longer ride through it. And so I want to encourage you guys to continue to just feed yourselves with positive things, read books, listen to podcasts, and keep up with Up2Us Sports, and you'll be okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
I just want to, sorry.
Go ahead, Pamela. No, please.
Yeah, I just want everybody to basically be the best support system they can be for their athletes, because having that as a player is definitely a whole lot, much more than some people might think. And as an athlete, if you have that support system behind you, then you're motivated. You know exactly what you want to do and who to do it for. Not that you're doing it for somebody else, but you're doing it to make yourself happy. And then that praise you get after is what makes you feel even better. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you.
She changes the game.
She changes
the game.
The game.
Period.
And it can't just be a slogan. We actually have to do the work. And what you see before you on the screen are a number of women who are absolutely doing the work. And so I thank you. I'm so proud of you, so proud to call you all my team. And we look forward to more of these Lunch and Learns, as well as look for the podcast that we'll have as well. All right. Have a good one. Bye.